everybody. It's Nikita. You're on the Heat with Keats. I'm your host. I have a very special guest today, Levi Washington. Welcome to my podcast. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me on, Nikita. It's my honor.
Thanks for coming on. I really am a big fan of your content. I've been watching you for quite some time. I've tried to interact a little bit with what you have on your pages, but for my viewers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with? A little introduction, please.
Oh, on the spot with an introduction. I would say I love writing. I'm a writer.
Sorry. I'm sorry, the cat. By the way, I should have just mentioned this before. We're gonna cut in and out. I should have mentioned that before.
Oh no, that's all good.
Because there are cats behind me. I hope that doesn't distract you. If it is a problem, I'll remove it, but she's
No, not a distraction whatsoever. Pets are
they've
welcome.
been my yeah, they've been my mascots from day one. But anyways, please continue, young man.
Yeah, I would say I'm a writer by trade first and foremost. That's where I got my start. Just trying to understand more about how to communicate who I am, first of all, with myself inwardly and then outwardly with the world around me and into my relationships. I got to start. I started posting on social media, posting a little bit about poetry, and that led to people connecting with that and asking me questions. So I started answering questions, and just every door that opened up in front of me from there led me to creating more and more content. And so I
Was
create
good.
content, and that's more or less what I do. And it's all about relationships and especially the toxic cycles that I'd been caught in for a number of
And
years.
now we're gonna get into that. What specifically do you think inspired you to make this specific niche of content, do you think?
I would say what really inspired me would be accountability. On there's I think there's a good and a dark side to everything. So accountability on one side, and then on the other side, I would say a little bit of seeking some validation for some of the things that I'd been going through and some of the things that I've been thinking as well.
Mm. So like that real life experience is, to me, in my perspective, like coming from the music side of things, being a musician, I feel like it's the best form of like being able to help other people.
Mm.
Did you find that for yourself? Like being able to have compassion towards other people, other marriages, what people might be going through. Like, did you see that in yourself? And you're like, I want to help people. Like, how did it start for you?
I think for me, it started as a cry for help, more or less, because I didn't really know what to do with the problems I was facing. And I just wanted to change the direction my life was going. And so I thought maybe if I start putting some of this out here for the world to see, it's going to help me stay accountable. It's going to help me change some of these things. And what that opened the door was to exactly that, starting to resonate with other people's stories. And I did realize the more I had the courage to be vulnerable, it also allowed other people to do the same.
Yeah, for sure. So going into my second question, in your experience, what's the most common misconception do you think people have with dating in 2025?
Okay, that's a good question. The most common misconception with dating in the modern world, I would say this belief that if it's hard, it's not right. Like thinking
Oh,
that love is easy.
yeah.
Yeah, we're so quick to give up on things. It's oh yeah, if it's supposed to feel easy, it's supposed to feel validating, it's supposed to make me feel good all the time. And the minute that it doesn't, we say, oh, that's not for me, and we just toss it out and on to the next.
So like the second it gets a little bit hard and the second it starts to feel like work,
Mm,
then people want to cop out, people want to leave.
hmm
I find that too. Um People seem to me, in like the new dating marketplace of like 2025, people are really scared of relationships. Like
mm,
they either don't want to get it. Like there's this new term that I guess young people are they're very proud to call themselves in situationships. Like
mm.
what is your thoughts on that? The whole situationships. Like when did we go from being single is one thing and then being in a relationship committed to someone else, and then where did this in between thing come of situationships? What's your thoughts on that whole thing?
Mm. That topic can go in so many different directions. So many different directions. I would say the path of least resistance is always the most traveled, right? So relationships require responsibility. Relationships require accountability, and those things are difficult. So if we can feel justified and validated in having our cake and eating it too, having all the rewards without the risks, without the responsibilities, without the commitment, that's what people are going to do.
So it seems like they're more so trying to chase after like the good side of things, but then they're not willing to put in the work because it's advertised to them
Mm,
as like, okay, this is just a good time. But then no one's really taught or no one wants to have accountability when it's teamwork. I feel
mhm,
like it takes teamwork. And that's where I think that you were mentioning like putting the work in, and it's a very like surface area idea of relationships these days where it's like, okay, well, what can you do for me? What are you doing for
mm,
me? Like, how can you make me look good? It's never about like teamwork anymore.
mm.
So this is going into my next question, and this is a big one and it makes people uncomfortable. But do you think, not to be like a fully loaded question, but do you think social media has ruined marriage and relationships? Be truthfully honest. And if you have to take your time, please, I want to know.
Sure. Give me a moment to collect my thoughts on that.
For better or for worse.
I, I can't put all the blame on social media. I think social media is the mechanism, it's the machine, but we're operating the machine. It's the magnifying glass. It really gives us the access for us to choose the things that we are. That's what I really think social media has done. I like what you said just previous to that about it's all about what we can get. It's all about what we can get, and that's what we've made relationships, and that's the mindset that I believe that social media really fuels and fosters within us. It's all about me, instant gratification, dopamine, constantly comparing our lives with every single time you open your phone and get on social media. It's all comparison, it's all instant
Yeah.
gratification, and so we're feeding these biases and these thought processes in our brains that are going to bleed out into our real lives.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like comparison's a thief of joy. It really
Mm,
is.
hmm,
And that I always wondered, like, in the 80s, like if we look at our parents even, and like a lot of their marriages from the older generation seemed to have lasted longer.
mm,
People took relationships more seriously because I feel like the idea of someone else wasn't so accessible. The thought of it like something better is accessible. I think social media is good for a lot of things. However, it really does allow us, and I'm guilty of it too, thinking that we can always do better.
mm,
Um I wanted to know your thoughts specifically on on the red pill community.
mm,
I really want to know like do you think that it has good things to offer, specifically young men, or do you think that there's like a problematic side to it as well? I do want to You're a very intelligent man, and I do want to understand what you think about it. Do you ever suggest red pill content or red pill principles to specifically young men or not? And if not, why?
mm. Okay, another loaded question. Just give me a moment here. Nikita, you're putting me on the hot seat. Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Heat with Keats. The heat with Keats.
Yeah, we're here for it. I think too much of anything is a bad thing.
Mhm.
I can empathize and I can understand why so many men are looking for something to give them a sense of direction, right? And so many of us spend so much time online as well,
Yeah.
more increasingly so, spend less time in real relationships outside touching grass, as they say. So I understand where the red pill movement and spaces have been born, but I can't say
Yeah.
I can't say that it's all good. I think there are some good aspects to it when you get into when you stay in the self improvement side of things. But once again, it's so quick to bleed into ego. It's so quick to bleed into victim mentality. It's so quick to bleed into materialism, and that's where I think it starts to get dangerous, where it starts to get toxic, where it starts to become something that is actually doing more harm than good to men.
Can you give me a specific example, specifics on that?
Some
Because I
specific.
can't speak to them. Yeah, I can't speak on the male perspective, but I'm trusting you that maybe you can shed some light to my male viewership. Like, give me some specifics that you
Okay.
think.
Well, for example, like specifics on what can drive men towards this, or specifics on. Uh,
What can be self-sabotaging about red pill?
okay, so there's a lot of the self improvement part of it when it gets into a lot of materialism, when it's all about, okay, you got to get your status, you got to get your money, and you got to get women. That's kind of like a large part of it. You know, the whole Andrew Tate stick, the whole Ashton Hall shtick, all of these guys that are just showing these extremely lavish lifestyles, lots of women, lots of power, and understandably that's going to stir men's blood, and that's what they're going to want to go after. But this, like, then you start having men judge themselves based on those principles. But what are those principles? Those are, I think that the value systems, when you start to get too deep into that world, it's actually just very, these are narcissistic pillars. When it's all about materialism, it's all about money, it's all about these shallow surface things. And when men start comparing themselves to these ideals and to these pillars, you start to push yourself into a more narcissistic type of viewpoint of the
Yeah.
world. And I think it's I think when you start to measure men by their status and by their money, how are the average men supposed to feel about themselves, and what are they going to do? So if you have to make over six figures in order to be considered a man, all the men who make less than that, what are they supposed to think about themselves? Oh, you're not a good enough man, you know? And so all the guys who are beneath that, now they're starting to struggle with ego issues and insecurity. And how does that now play out in their relationships? If I start going into relationships thinking I'm not a six figure man, so I'm not a real man, women aren't going to like me, this and this and this, they're not going to show up very well in dating. They're not going to up very well in their relationships. There's going to be a ton of insecurity. There's going to be a ton uh, of ego wounds for
Mhm.
these men. So any of these guys who are starting to believe these things about themselves and start to compare themselves by these metrics, they're setting themselves up for disaster, really.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Like I never really thought about like how it would make the average guy feel. And also when did we ever say that average was bad?
Mm,
Um like growing up seeing my parents, they were never rich or necessarily like super wealthy, but they raised us well. They clothed us, they fed us, they put us in the best schooling that they could. And to me, that average is, that was fine. Like that was perfectly good for me and my brothers.
mm,
And we ended up being like good citizens, people that care for people and like, decently religious and good people. So like when did this idea of like being average, when did that ever come across as a bad thing? And that's where I think that red pill can get kind of confused.
mm,
Um because it can lead men to be, well, I need a six pack. I need to get, a six-figure salary. I need to be 6 foot. Not necessarily in order for you to, have a family. Um, but I do think that there are good things about red pill um principles, like wanting to get better in the gym, fitness. um, taking care of your temple, taking care of yourself as a man, being
Mhm.
a provider. Being
Mhm.
a provider, that's the biggest one.
Mhm.
So I do think that there are, but I think that young men tend to, they never really know when to filter out when it's becoming self-sabotage and then
Mhm.
when it's chew the meat and spit out the bones
Mhm.
situation. And I think social media ties into that. I mean, I am an Andrew Tate fan, but I think he's overly he's a very sensationalized person. Not
Mhm.
everybody can be Andrew Tate. And it kind of also tricks women from what I've seen from like my female friend group. They all feel like that they can get the NBA player. Like they
Mhm.
all feel like they can get like the top tier guy, but not all of us can, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Like it shouldn't be. It's going back to the social media thing again. It's like, okay, well, if I pull up to this NBA game, if I pull up to this sports game, or if I, come to this event, then maybe I can take someone's husband from her. Like
Mhm.
it becomes a toxic way of thinking.
Mhm.
And I think that's, from my perspective, that's kind of what I feel like starts to ruin the potential of marriage and like what can ruin relationships.
Mhm.
um but what do you think are some of the biggest red flags that you think people will tend to not pay attention to when they first start dating?
Mm. Okay. Thanks for that conversation and those questions.
Yeah,
By the way, that's a topic that
no
is
problem.
tough to
I had
touch
to
on
give my
sometimes.
piece on it.
Yeah, it's tough to
Yeah.
touch on that sometimes. But uh, as far as red flags go, I think first of all, what I want to say about red flags is I think sometimes we can hyperfixate on red flags too much, and we almost stop looking for the things that we do want. We're so hyper fixated on what we don't want. So we're like those. I always think of the meerkats that they pop up and they're always looking for danger. They're always looking for, okay, where's the red flag? Where's the red flag? But you're in more of a survival mode. That's what that says to me. If you're always looking for red flags, you're always on the lookout for danger because you're actually pretty wounded and weak and you're fear based, and you're going to have a
Right,
hard,
fear-based.
yeah, fear based. And so people who are based in fear are going to have a really hard time uh, finding love, because love and fear, they don't coexist very well. So that's what I'd say about red flags. But to answer the question, I would say consistency, a lack of consistency would be a red flag that I think a lot of people miss. You want to look for consistency, and some of us, it's like, oh, they haven't texted you for a couple of days. You've been talking for weeks now, and they still disappear for 8 hours and have these excuses. And like, let's not lie to ourselves. I think consistency is a big one that we miss for sure. I think a lack of accountability is another big one that we miss, when people kind of make themselves out to be a hero. They don't really speak about some of the things that they've struggled with. It'll be, oh, my exes are all toxic, right? Or they'll talk about certain struggles, but you won't see their actions aligning with the changes that that person needs to make. It's like, well, I've always really struggled with alcohol, and they still drink every weekend. It's like you
Right.
can acknowledge that you've had a problem with this, but you're still engaging in it. That to me is would be another red flag thing, because sometimes we think, oh, they're so honest and they can tell me about this issue or that issue, but if their actions aren't actually taking action on the things that they recognize as issues,
Yeah.
yeah, they're just, it's almost like they're going to feign vulnerability, because you're going to think like, oh wow, they're so vulnerable and they're so honest and they're so self-aware, but you're ignoring the fact that they're not actually doing anything about it.
So it's almost like, when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's kind of tough because we all have something. Um, so that's a tough one. Like, um, I know one of my questions here was, um, what role does accountability play in maintaining a healthy relationship or marriage? Um, why do we suffer so much, do you think, with having ownership of accountability, because I think accountability is not just the honesty that you mentioned, but it's
Hmm.
also taking the action with it. It's not just saying, okay, well, I have a gambling problem, at least I'm honest about it, at least I'm honest about it. Like, no, it's also like, are you getting the help for it? Like, do you know going to the casino is a bad idea for you?
Yeah.
Like, it's the action plan. Why are we so scared of it? Because I'm guilty of it too. Like, I doom scroll on TikTok all the time, and I know I should cut down my screen time. That's like a micro, like, level of like accountability that I don't like. I should take my own advice, but like, why do we suffer with not wanting to take accountability so much? And I feel like females suffer from it more, but um we don't want to take responsibility. Why do you think that is?
Because it's difficult. Because it requires something of us, I
Because it's
think.
hard.
Because it's hard. Yeah. Because we have to
Yeah.
do something. It's so much easier just to blame something else for it or make
Yeah.
some excuse for it. Being honest with ourselves is actually genuinely a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that a lot of potential beautiful relationships could last a lot longer if like someone just if someone just took accountability. Usually we look to the male to want to lead us. But at the same time, like, accountability in 2025 is so difficult because you can hide it behind filters, you can hide it behind this, you can hide it behind that. Um, but like, it's a tough one. Like, and I do, I keep seeing memes about how, you know how they keep saying it's I'm on women's side, by the way. I'm not I'm for my girls. But you know how they say it's like 100 men versus like one gorilla. You know that meme going around?
Yeah.
And it's like 100 women versus accountability.
Yeah. I've been seeing those
You seen
memes.
that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
I seen that. Why do we get targeted as the ones having the worst time with accountability? I feel like some women that I look up to are great at taking accountability. They're great at communication. Where is this like reputation of like women not being the best accountability partners? Like, I don't know if you've gotten that from your research, but like some of us do take accountability. So where is this? Is it a red pill sourced thing to hate women? Like,
Mm.
that's always the thing that they use against us is like, oh, it's a female, she can't take accountability. Where's that coming from? Like from a male perspective, where is that
Mm.
from?
I would like to do a little bit more research and writing on that. That is something that I have been actually, funny that you should say that, coincidentally, thinking about and working on something in that direction actually. But I think the trope, I think there's a reason why there are some of these stereotypes and tropes and things like that. For example, there are some allowances that I think that women can kind of get away with in a way that men can't. There are some certain expectations on men in certain areas that women don't really experience. For example, there's a lot more expectations on women's beauty, I would say, right? Than a man's. There's a lot more expectations on the way a woman looks. She's often boiled down to the way she looks. It doesn't matter what she accomplishes. It's like, but is she beautiful, right? And that is something that us men don't experience, and we will never really understand it. And that's why it can get women so upset, and that's why women, the beauty standards are really tough. So for men, though, there are different expectations on us, right? And so it really depends on the conversation we're having where the accountability is going to lie, right? So when it comes to, for something like income and providing, right? There are a lot more expectations on men, right? If right, so that's kind of, I think it's more of a conversation that changes depending on what it's about. Women versus accountability, what are we talking about here? What is the specific thing that we're not being accountable for? So when I was on I saw a video the other day that was talking that showed a boy hugging his mom on Mother's Day, and he didn't get her anything. And all the comments were talking about how this is why I don't want to have boys. This is, oh,
Oh,
I'm so thankful I didn't have a boy. This is why I don't want to have sons. This is why, right? And it was just
that's harsh.
a lot of man hating. But if we saw the same video, shoe on the other foot, if there was a young girl who was with her dad and the caption was, she didn't get anything for Father's Day and he was hugging her, I don't think anybody would be saying, oh, girls are terrible. They would be saying, that's a good father loving his daughter. That's a good father loving his daughter, right?
Right.
Why do,
Yeah.
like, that's what I mean. Is like there are some of these social double standards that exist where it's, this is okay for women to do, but it's not okay for men to do. And I think that that's where we kind of get into the weeds of accountability.
Okay, I understand. Um, Also, like, I think society will reduce people down to like um, what their gender is known for, like utility for, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So, like, okay, well, like I'm more kind of required to like cook and like clean and like serve my dad when he comes over to visit us because that's, like a respect thing, especially coming from like my culture. But like, my brothers are more required to work in the garden, work in the garage, and help our dad when he needs help as a growing old man. And like that's more of like a respect thing where it's like you're kind of required what your gender expects of you. I don't think it's like necessarily a lack of accountability or
mm,
um necessarily comparing the son and daughter aspect.
mm,
Um that's where I would disagree with
mm.
you a little
That's a
bit.
good point. That's a good point.
Y-
I on the spot, I'm not really sure I can think of a better way to explain what I'm trying to say, but that's true. There are just
Yeah, but
different expectations on men and women. That's a good point.
you you did say that you wanted to do more research on that.
Hmm.
I think it's a great thing that maybe you could do content on. I would really like to know what your research is
Yeah.
on that, as opposed to why do women get attacked when it comes to accountability, but when it comes to like income, men get attacked. But that's interesting. My next, actually, this was a question that I had earlier, but I it segued into what we were talking about. But going back to relationships and marriages, I'm trying to keep this podcast focused on people who are already in relationships or married, because I know like it's completely different navigating life when you do have like a partner.
Mm,
So when do you think couples can identify when they like, how can they identify that they will need counseling or external help? Like, what are the signs that, like, okay, maybe a couple should consider going to counseling or
mm,
therapy to like fix their relationship or marriage? Um, like when we talked about red flags, but when are signs that it's like, okay, like to keep this going, I feel like it's a business partnership to be a life partner with someone. When do you think that a couple should consider, okay, yeah, it's getting tough. We need to, how can they identify that, they need to go seek counseling
mm.
specifically?
Good question. I think I think relationships, they don't fall apart uh, at once. They fall apart over time, and then all at once it's like erosion. The ground starts to get soft and it starts to erode, and then the mudslide happens. Same kind of idea. So by the time you get to the point where I'm saying, oh, we need to get counseling, oh, we need help, it might be already to the point where there's a landslide. So I actually am a big believer in being proactive, not just reactive. Because if I'm waiting for the signs to say, like, oh, this is when I need to go to counseling, you're already being reactive. You're already waiting to, the scale is now tipping at 350 pounds, and now you're going to start taking care of your health. Come on, this should have happened sooner. So I'm a big advocate for, if you are really serious about this person, if you see a future with them, why not go to some proactive counseling together? To sometimes we don't have the knowledge or the tools to ask ourselves the right questions and ask each other the right questions. So getting in with an expert, somebody who works in the field, to get us on the same level and get us asking each other some of these questions that are really difficult that we might avoid right up until the altar or after the altar or after a child even. It's probably better that
Yeah.
we get into the counselor's office sooner than later. Like, why not?
You
What do you really have to
don't
lose?
Yeah, you don't wanna wait till last minute, or you
Hmm.
don't wanna, like, wait till, like, both of you are hanging from a thread, like, it's very I mean, disagreements happen in, with relationships, but I think that people look maybe at couples counseling like, "Oh, something's wrong with us."
Hmm.
That's kind of embarrassing to admit that we're going to that, like,
Hmm.
there's um, a stereotype or a stigma around it,
Yeah.
but, like, I like your fresh viewpoint on it, that it's like, why not start early? Not saying that you're foreshadowing that something is gonna go wrong, um, but it is healthy. I think it should be more normalized. Do you
Yeah.
agree?
I agree,
Yeah.
100%.
Um, okay, good. Okay, this question's a little intense. I don't know how you're gonna answer this. Um, how do you advise people to rebuild, if even possible, to rebuild trust after betrayal or infidelity?
That is a tough one.
Yeah.
That is a
And I
tough
know it's based on the severity of the betrayal or infidelity, but it does happen. And if children are involved, like, nobody wants that. But
one.
what do you do?
Mm.
How can that even? What do you suggest for something like that?
I've seen it work. I've seen it fall apart. It usually doesn't work. But I will say, if you do choose to continue to pursue the relationship, I try to think of things through images. So when I think of a bad break, think of it like a physical break. So you've been in a really terrible wreck just now. You're going to need uh, the casts, the crutches, the wheelchair, and you're going to need your partner to help you through that. And they caused the damage, but they can't do the healing, right? So they might have done the thing that hurt you, but you're the one who still has to learn how to walk, but you are going to need their support through that, right? So
Okay.
it's going to take time. It's going to take time. I think what I would say that I don't think a lot of people talk about is when you are rebuilding trust, I think a lot of that is actually going to come from rebuilding trust with yourself because you still have free will. And I
Okay.
can't control your free will. And so if I try to control your free will, it's going to actually leave me feeling more out of control. Right. That's our first. We're gonna be feeling really jealous. We're gonna want to micromanage, and there is some. We're gonna need some of that. We're gonna want maybe some passwords. We're gonna maybe want some locations to help us feel stable. Think of these things as the cast and the crutches and the stints as our body heals. But overall, it's I need to learn how to trust myself again, and because I chose this person, and right now I feel wrong about them, and I feel like I've lost my idea of what we
Oh,
had of the future together. I feel like all of the memories, all the things that we've built up into this point are a lie. So my future's gone, my past is gone, and this person that I thought was this person is now a stranger that I don't even recognize. They're not who I thought they were, and I was wrong, right?
we
So
self blame. We start blaming ourselves.
yeah, we can deep down. We might blame them outwardly, but I think deep down a part of us even blames ourselves
Yeah.
for being there, right? So I can only trust
Mm.
me. I can only trust what I'm going to do, what I'm going to become. You're going to choose what you're going to do, and I've got to know that I'm going to be okay no matter what you've done. You did this thing, and it actually doesn't have anything to do with my worth. My worth only comes from the things that I do.
That's so hard to do that.
Hmm.
That's very difficult. I feel like also like women, for example, if they've been cheated on, they'll blame themselves. Like, oh, I'm not beautiful enough, or I'm
Mm,
not fit enough. What does she have that I didn't have?
mm, yeah,
Um, but it seems to, I don't know what it feels like for a man to go through that, but I feel like the trust will probably it can be rebuilt, but it might not ever really be the same
yeah,
because you're always just going to be wondering, oh my God, is it going to happen again?
yeah,
Um, and then you also feel like it's really disappointing. That's a tough one. Um, because if you're in a marriage, like, and there's children involved, how do you stay so strong in that? I don't
mm,
even know. I wouldn't wish it on um, my worst enemy. But do you think love alone is enough to sustain a long-term relationship in that
no,
case?
no,
It requires a lot more than that, right?
yeah,
Can you break it down? Give it to us.
yeah. Well, there's going to be days when you don't feel like loving each other. And so if you leave it up to love, it's going to leave the door open. It's really got to come down to choice and commitment, right? Love is an emotion. It's energy in motion. It's going to come, it's going to ebb, it's going to flow. And a lot of it actually comes from the actions that you choose. And so when you choose something to do something loving, love, the emotion comes as a result of that choice. And that's what's got to get you through some of the more difficult times. You have to wake up and you have to choose each other, even on the days when you don't really feel like it. Because if you leave it up to how you feel, there's like I said, there's going to be days when something else feels more validating, and that's going to feel like, and the validation of something else going, oh, that feels like love to me, oh, that feels better to me than this person who has been, a little bit mean to me lately, a little bit short on patience with me lately, and I haven't been feeling really good
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, no, I understand. So it's not just love alone, but I think there's tools that specifically a married couple should try to utilize, and that, like, like the common ones I'm no professional, but what I would think is like obviously communication,
Mm,
um going on frequent dates, doing things together often, um understanding, like, I also think that like obviously intimacy is important, so like never let that go dry. So there's tools that people can use, but like when the love fades, or I mean, I don't know if love can is I wouldn't say like if love fades then you just move on to the next. I do, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, you said it requires work,
mm,
right? So
yeah,
there are tools that people can use to keep a long-term relationship going. And like with the whole thing with social media, going back to my second question, like the whole thing with social media is like, oh, I'll get it somewhere else. Like this person would be easier to date. It's so accessible. Like you're shopping for a mate online pretty much all the time.
yeah,
So if we're not utilizing those tools, it's just not going to work. Love alone can't, like it's not enough. I look at relationships. I started looking at relationships and like potential marriages as like business partnerships. I know that sounds bad, but it really is like a
mm,
business partnership. Like you're having a certain amount of meals with this person every day. You're sharing your finances. Like all these things requires work. Like it's not just love and lollipops and rainbows the whole time.
yeah,
So when people want to get into a relationship so quickly, I don't think that they really understand how much work it's supposed to it's gonna take.
yeah,
Um and the younger generation, they're super intelligent and tech savvy and really innovative, but I feel like their people skills and their relationship skills are like kind of suffering. Do you think this is going in a completely different conversation now? Do you think it's
I'm
because
here for it.
everything is a yeah, do you think that's because everything is AI collaborated at this point?
Mm,
Our whole
that's
lives, basically.
yeah. I would actually kind of circle back to saying the path of least resistance is going to be the most traveled. And I think there's just less and less resistance. We're making things easier and easier and easier and more gratifying with less consequences. Everything, right? There are no consequences anymore. We're trying to remove all the consequences, but keep all of the rewards. And that's the way that the world continues to go. And social media is making that easier. AI is making that easier. We get all the rewards, but with less and less work, less and less responsibility, less and less commitment, right? And so that's what's making people weaker. They're not really necessarily getting weaker per se. We're just indoctrinating our brains into seeking all the rewards for as little effort as possible. And I can't
Right.
demonize people for doing that. People are going to do that. If you can get the juiciest fruit for the least amount of work, that's what you're going to do.
Mm. Yeah, but it's usually not gonna last, or the quality
No.
of it. And I feel like I'm in a closer relationship with ChatGPT right now than with any of my friends.
Mm,
Because it knows everything about me. I don't have to put in the work with anything. Like
mm,
it knows everything. Like it knows my medical history. It knows how I'm, how to help me when I'm feeling a certain type of way.
mm,
Like, do I really? It does make it. You become lazy.
mm.
Straight up, you just become lazy. Like, do I really need to go out there and actually make actual meaningful relationships when I
Yeah.
have ChatGPT doing it for me? So
Mm,
imagine these like iPad kids, imagine like our younger generation. They're
yeah.
not on the playground anymore. They're not being taught like the work reward system that you're talking about. They're
Yeah.
not being taught that at all. I'm very nervous for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
In terms of relationships, I'm very, very, very scared for marriages, for relationships, and for the birth rate. This
Yeah.
just went really deep. This just
Yeah.
went really deep. Like, I want to encourage people on my podcast with my YouTube channel. And I'm sure you're doing the exact same thing. You want to instill hope in people, but I really want to encourage people to have human connections. That's what we're here for. We're really not supposed to be alone.
Yeah.
Um, and AI is making it very easy.
Yeah. Even social media, I can say from my own experience, it I'll get a lot more validation when I choose to post something that I think on the internet. Because what do I get from that? I can do it from the comfort of my own home. I don't have to go outside. I don't
Yeah.
have to interact with anybody. I just here, click on my camera. Here we go, post it. And now I can interact with hundreds of people, thousands of people, and they all can tell me that, oh, I'm great, I'm smart. They resonate with what I have to say, etc. And so I get to feel all good about myself, and I get to feel these pseudo connections with all these people. And I didn't have to go anywhere for it. Or I could call up my buddy and make plans and then go sit down and have a coffee and chat with him. And that costs me so much more energy, so much more effort. And I get very little dopamine out of it. I get very little gratification out of it. So you're totally right. But that's the direction that the world is going, and it's going in a negative direction.
Yeah, it's I think AI is also incredible though. Like there are good things to it. I mean, I wouldn't be able to sit here with you and digitally interview you
Yeah.
from all the way in a different province if it wasn't for all this technology around me. So I'm grateful for that. But would it be better to be in person and have a conversation? Yeah. Would it be
Mhm.
better to have like human connection with my followers instead? Yeah, of course. But I don't know. Who knows what it's gonna be? Imagine ChatGPT in like 10 years.
Yeah, it's going to be virtual
Would
reality. You put that thing on a
Yeah,
robot, and that'll be your best friend. You just put on your headset and
right,
you
exactly. And
download
I'm
what you
just
can make them look however you want. You just download the deep fake of whatever your favorite celebrity is, and you'll
right.
be able to hang out with them, and
We
they'll
already
never
have that
argue with
now.
you.
Definitely. We already have that now. Like
Yeah.
yeah, as a musician, I always look at like um Drake type beats or Ariana Grande type beats, and
Hmm.
I'm like AI generated is like kind of replacing the artist now too, but we'll say that for another podcast. But it is kind of scary, and I am nervous for relationships. That's what I'm nervous for, like in the future. Like will the children right now, will they get to even experience like a marriage, or will everything just be, AI collaborated? Like, I
Mm,
feel like people's um um like people skills like is not really needed anymore. So like that, yeah, it's just an interesting topic to me. It's very fascinating. But tying back into just what we just discussed before this, what advice would you give to somebody healing from a toxic relationship or a divorce?
mm. So this is probably closer to my wheelhouse for sure because I've gotten pretty good at starting over and building myself back up and using some different tips and tricks in order to do that. I would say that I skew a little bit more ego driven. And I think some guys will relate to that, especially. So, after a relationship ends and I'm feeling pretty low about myself, I almost use my competitive spirit to take that jealousy. Maybe it's like, oh, I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I need
Hmm.
to grow. I need to be better. I need to think about what will they see? Who will they see? Which Levi will they see in 6 months from now? The same Levi
Yeah.
or the Levi where they feel like, wow, I messed up. I missed the bus. So I'll actually take that and start to grow myself in all the different directions that I want to grow in. For example, historically, there was a time when I felt like, oh, I'm not making enough money. That was where
Oh,
my insecurity was at that time based on the situation I was in. Okay, so I took that and I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? I can either be upset about this and start to think, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can be like, okay, my brain is really telling me is, oh, I want to be more financially successful. So then I started getting into stocks and I started getting into investing, and so that actually became a catalyst for success, and that started to give me a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. So it's almost after a breakup, it gives us an opportunity for breakthrough depending on the perspective that we take on it. So the biggest thing that I say to people is have grace for yourself, but move because I think that time right after a breakup, that's when we have to look at ourselves in a way that is really raw, really painful, and that is the moment where we can break through to the next. That's what we always talk about is breakup glow ups, right? Everybody has their breakup glow up, but what I would actually like to say to people now, because I am starting to feel a little bit more heart centered rather than externally based, because I've found as much as I've chased all the external stuff, all of that stuff has been great, but it's never left me feeling fulfilled. It's always like there's always more, and I'm never enough, and I'm never enough. And so coming
you mean
back
like the
to,
surface? You mean like the surface level glow up
yes,
is never
surface,
enough?
exactly. So if we focus too much on that, that's where we start to base all of our self-worth from. And so if we feed into that too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So if I feed in too much about like, oh, I've got to get my money up, I got to look a certain way, and that starts to be the only place where I'm getting my sense of identity, that becomes my whole personality. My personality becomes the way I look and how much money I have. And yeah, you can imagine relationships from that state of being are going to continue to fall apart because I'm not actually looking at who I am.
Oh, for sure. So, like, I think we could both agree that healing, well, I don't like using the word healing. I've said this in a previous podcast. I think the word is waking up. I've said this in my self-awareness podcast as well. It's not healing. Like, I'm not waking up from from stitches. Like, it's
Mm,
waking up. Um so the best way is obviously like self-improvement and like substantial growth, like inner growth.
mm-hmm,
That's what I would suggest to people, but it's so hard coming out of a
mm-hmm,
relationship, especially a long-term one.
yeah.
So like I want to give people hope in that sense that there is the surface level glow up is great. It's lovely, but it's not long lasting. I
Mm,
feel like there's inner work that needs to happen. But this leads to my final question.
mm-hmm.
Um, if you could give one universal piece of relationship advice that applies to everybody, what would it be?
I'm a little biased. I would say write. Write. Because I think, at least in my experience and what has really helped me the most, it's learning how to articulate, first of all, to myself what I'm thinking and feeling, and ask myself some really difficult questions. Because the better I get to know myself and the better I can communicate who I am to myself, the better I can communicate to everyone else. It makes me better in my relationships. It makes me better in business. It makes me a better friend, a better future father, etc. So I think learning how to communicate really, really well with myself effectively, that is probably the best relationship advice.
So it could be like in any form, like journaling, like a gratitude journal. Like not everyone can be like an awesome author like you, but like, would you suggest journaling, um, typing out your feelings into a blog, maybe? Like, what do you think are some helpful tips?
I see it the same way. So, fitness, for example. Some people are bodybuilders, some people like yoga, some people like running,
Yeah.
some people, right? Doesn't really matter the modality, move your body. Same thing with writing. Maybe you're not going to be
Oh, okay.
a professional writer, but if journaling speaks to you, start journaling. If poetry speaks to you, do some poetry. And you don't even have to be great at it, but I think it's really just
Just
about
do it.
just do it. Just learn how to communicate a little more effectively. I think that revolutionizes relationships more than most other things.
Okay, that's awesome. So just like going back to like what we said before, just move. I like that. I feel like we should title this podcast Just Move.
Just move. I like it.
Just move. I definitely agree. But yeah, that comes to the end of my questions. This was a very good conversation that we both shared. I'm very, very appreciative that you joined and gave us some insight. Can you do a little outro for us and just let my viewers know where they can find you, all of your handles, your Instagram, your TikTok? I'll obviously put it in the final upload, but just let them know where they can find you.
Thank you for having me on, Nikita. It's been a pleasure. I know sometimes my train of thought can go a little bit in circles. That's why I like writing a lot more, because it
It's
helps me
good.
get it down and then chop it up so it makes sense, because sometimes my mind kind of rabbit trails, right? So, but
All
honored
good.
to be on here. Great conversation. You can find me on most social media platforms under Levi Washington. So at Levi Washington on Instagram. I'm over on YouTube as well. I'm on TikTok. Uh, but yeah, all the socials. Just look up my name and you'll find me there.
Clouds.
You're watching The Heat with Keats, and this is Levi.